Hello, welcome to another video. As you can tell from the title, today we are bringing out TBR Pursuit at the wrong time of month. But I am happy to introduce you to TBR Pursuit Recommends, which is a video where I will be playing TBR Pursuit, but I will not be playing for me. I'll be playing for you. So this is my TBR board game. If you're unfamiliar with TBR Pursuit, I will leave a link to the playlist where I play it for my monthly TBR down below. But essentially, it's a Trivial Pursuit board, but we've made each colour on the board correlate to a genre, and then I have a question card deck where there are questions to find books specific to that genre, and we fill up a pie and pick a TBR. This is the board. As I say, I will link the playlist so you can familiarise yourself with it, but I'm not going to hold that up the entire time because that would just be hard work, so we ain't going to do that. But basically the plan for today is that I am going to play a round of TBR Pursuit, but I'm not going to play it for me, I'm going to play it for you and give you 6 book recommendations based on where we land on TBR Pursuit. So we'll see what list of 6 random recommendations comes out when I play a round of TBR Pursuit for you. I'm pretty sure that's all there is in terms of an introduction to this. I'm assuming you're familiar with the game here, so let's just kick this off with roll number 1. As you can see, I have a little orange pie, as I'm recommending to you, so I'm going with my theme of orange other, because I am the other. Do you see what I did there? Right, roll number 1. 2. Let's see if I can recommend you an adult fantasy. What have I got to work with? A 5-star prediction. So for this I'm going to go for something that I gave 5 stars that I predict everyone else probably will as well. So we have a purple pie in there already. Okay, so for roll number 1, I went with an adult fantasy, and the card is, can you name a 5-star prediction? So of course these cards are created for me picking my TBRs, so it's going to be very much prediction based and very me specific, so I'm going to have to kind of twist the wording on these a little bit. So what I'm going to twist this to is something that I've rated 5 stars already, that I think you will too. And for this, I'm going to go with the Mistborn trilogy as a whole, because as far as an adult fantasy that I think almost everyone will enjoy, this is the one that comes to mind. There is so much in here that I think anyone can read this and pull something from it that they enjoy. And although the books are quite chunky, it's a chunky trilogy, it is just a trilogy, and Brandon Sanderson's writing is really easy to get through. When I first decided to read Mistborn, I really thought that Brandon Sanderson's writing was going to be pretty dense. I was really intimidated by it because of the size and the reputation that Brandon Sanderson's writing has for being like some of the best in fantasy. I was really intimidated going into it. However, it is really well written, it's so easy to understand, it's not dense, it's fast paced, and for the size of it you can get through these so quickly because they're so compelling. So this trilogy is about a young girl called Vin who is picked up by an allomancer called Calcia. In this world, allomancers exist, who are people who can ingest metals to gain the power that that metal gives you. So you can either be a Mistling, where you can ingest one metal and gain its power, or you can be a Mistborn, where you can ingest all of them and pull on all of their powers. And we follow a couple of Mistborn and their plan to overthrow the Dark Lord. It's set in a world where the Dark Lord won, as the tagline here is, what if the Dark Lord won? So we know we're in a world with lots of terrible things, very dystopian vibe. So we follow this band of criminals as they want to overthrow the Dark Lord and change the way this world is run. The magic is really interesting in here. It's very much logic based and quite easy to understand. It didn't take me too long to get my head wrapped around it, so I think it's quite an easy one to understand. As well as that, just fast paced, super compelling. The intrigue is so high at all points, especially in the second and third books. Like, the end of this book didn't necessarily have a cliffhanger, and at the end of this I was very much like, well, where do they go from here? What can the second book do? And then I read the second book, and at the end of the second book, it was very much, I need the third one immediately. Like, that cliffhanger at the end of the second book was intense. I needed the next one. ASAP. So it's a really compelling trilogy, and I wholeheartedly recommend if you want somewhere to start with adult fantasy. I actually think this is a great starting point, and I am now a Brandon Sanderson convert. I can't wait to read more of his stuff myself. Roll number 2. Oh. Well, I can't give you a punishment because you haven't played before. 1. Okay, I need to recommend you a YA fantasy. And what am I working with? A book over 300 pages. Let's see what I can do. And a pink pie in there. Moving on to roll number 2, we got a YA fantasy, and the card is to name a book over 300 pages. Now, this one really could have been anything. There's a lot of YA fantasies over 300 pages, but I've taken this opportunity to recommend a book that I don't really talk about all that often, and that is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I don't talk about it a lot, but I absolutely love this trilogy and gave all 3 of them 5 stars. You just don't hear me talk about it enough. I read all of these on audio, actually, and the audiobook is fantastic. I love the narrator. It just felt so homely reading them, and every time I dove back into the audiobook, it just gave me such a sense of comfort. So I really do recommend the audiobooks for these, but also just the series in general. Again, super compelling. Not necessarily the most fast-paced ones. This is definitely a little bit slower, but really fascinating. I loved the development as the world as the series went on. We learned a little bit more about the world and the history of it and who these characters are and where they've come from, what they've done, what's led us to this point. So we get quite a lot of the background of the world leading up to its current situation, and I found it all super fascinating. It was really well developed. But this series follows a young girl called Karu, who is an art student in Prague. However, she's living a little bit of double life. As well as being an ordinary girl going to art classes, she's also an errand runner for a monstrous creature called Brimstone, who is the closest thing to family that she's ever known. And one day, the door that links her world to the world that Brimstone comes from is cut off, and she's cut off from her family and needs to work out what to do about that. As well as that, we also have angels in here, and the angels play an interesting part. There is kind of an otherworldly war going on. There's a lot to this. There's the mystery of like where Brimstone comes from and what's going on in that side of the world, but also the angels and where they've come from and what they've got to do with everything. And I don't want to say too much more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. But of course, it's also a love story, and this is the story of how an angel and a devil fell in love, and it did not end well. So it's a bit of a tragic love story there as well, which isn't normally my cup of tea. However, the balance between that and everything else that's going on worked really well for me. I thoroughly enjoyed this trilogy. Roll number 3. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Roll again or blue blank. Let's see how blue blank goes, because those prompts are very vague. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll see what happens here. What's on Scribd? What can I recommend you that's on Scribd? Now this will be different from country to country, but it will be based on what's on my Scribd. And a little blue pie in there. Roll number 3, we landed on a blue, and the card is What's on Scribd. And I had a little scroll through Scribd, and let me tell you, I don't know if Scribd has had an update or if just my restrictions on what's on Scribd have been lifted, but there's a whole heck of a lot on there now. Scrolling through, I found some of my favourites on there. Echo North by Joanna Ruth Myers on there, a polar fantasy retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which I absolutely adored. Follows a young girl called Echo North who makes a deal with a wolf for her father's safety and has to go and live with him in his mysterious palace carved into a mountain for a year. Absolutely adore that book. We've also got The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which is one that I speak about a little bit more frequently, which is the story of a village where they sacrifice the youngest child each year to the witch, and the witch takes these children away. However, from the witch's perspective, she's really confused as to why this village keeps sacrificing babies or just leaving babies out in the woods, and she takes them and treats them well and feeds them starlight and sends them on to loving homes. However, she accidentally feeds moonlight, which everyone knows is the source of magic, so she has to raise a magic child by accident. Love that book, so beautiful. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is on there. We all know I love some Schwab. In fact, I think all of Schwab's books are on there at the minute for me, so anything by Schwab, you know I recommend. But something else that was on there that I thought I would recommend just to get some middle grade in here is A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison. Because this is a middle grade series that I absolutely love, but don't think I recommend enough. So again, an opportunity to get one in here that I don't talk about anywhere near as much as I should. But this is the story of the Widdersham sisters, who are trapped by an ancient curse. They cannot leave the island that they live on. There are 3 magical objects with the power to change their fate. Will they be enough to break the curse, or will they lead the sisters even deeper into danger? So the middle sister, Betty, is desperate to get away. She wants adventure in the great wide somewhere. And she's desperate to break this curse and get away, and they are wrapped up in a bit of a witch's tale, and there's all sorts of magical mystery going on here. It's really atmospheric, like chilling and a little bit creepy, but great adventure. The sisterly bonds in here is beautiful, and the youngest of these sisters really just reminds me of my sister. Charlie Widdershins is exactly like my sister, so holds a really dear place in my heart. But this is a fantastic middle grade series. I haven't actually yet read the 3rd one in this, but I need to get on that ASAP because I really enjoy these and do not think I recommend them enough. And it's on Scribd. Roll number 4. Again, I cannot punish you. Oh, or throw the dice somewhere else. Let's try again. 1. Orange, other, or yellow sci-fi. I'm gonna go for a sci-fi because, again, the others are a bit weird. So let's see what sci-fi I have to work with. A book that has multiple perspectives. Fascinating. And there is a yellow in there. Roll number 4, we landed on a yellow, and we have, can you name a sci-fi with multiple perspectives? Now this was actually really hard for me to find one because I haven't read many, apparently. I thought, oh, does Sleeping Giants work for this? But it's actually more like interview format, so it's not multiple perspectives because it's all from the interviewer's perspective. And then I thought about recommending Illuminae. That is definitely from different perspectives. However, I DNF'd the sequel to Illuminae, so did I really want to recommend that? I don't know. So I'm coming at you with some more Schwab. Vicious by Victoria Schwab is a sci-fi about Victor and Eli, and we follow both Victor and Eli's perspectives. Victor and Eli were best friends in college, and they worked on a thesis on extraordinaries, who are people who have near-death experiences which trigger extraordinary abilities. They are working on their thesis on this and want to work out how they can become extraordinaries, and they work out how to give themselves these near-death experiences and are successful. Flash forward 10 years, Victor's just got out of prison and he is after revenge on Eli for something that's happened in their past, and we kind of flip between these 2 timelines to work out how they've gone from one to the other and what the bloody hell is going on. Full of morally grey characters. Both Victor and Eli think they're in the right. Neither think they're a villain, but both sort of are a villain. We also have Sydney in here, who is adorable. I love Sydney, a young girl, and how she gets wrapped up in this as well. It's all just so fantastic. So morally grey. Really, for a good portion of this, I think you struggle with who to follow. I do think there is a clear winner. Like, a clear... not quite good guy, because neither of them are good guys, but there is a clear preference. But they're, you know, morally grey. That's what we all say about Vicious. Morally grey characters. I think this book is super compelling, really fast-paced, especially with the, like, flitting time zones going back and forth. The intrigue is kept really high at all times, and I'm a massive fan of Victoria Schwab. We know this. And this series, the Villains series, there's 2 of them at the moment, Vicious and Vengeful, are some of my absolute faves. So, of course I'm going to recommend this, and it fits for a sci-fi with multiple perspectives. Roll number 5. I cannot punish you. The board does not like you. 1. Let's roll again. I'm not going to do another blue. Or punish you. Jesus. 1. Another YA. What have I got to work with? A standalone YA fantasy. Fascinating. There's a little pink pie in there. Roll number 5, we have a pink YA fantasy, and the card for this one is Can You Name a Standalone? Now, this was really difficult. I struggled with thinking of a YA standalone fantasy that I could recommend. I thought about A Sorcery of Thorns, which I did really enjoy, by Margaret Rogerson, about a girl who works in kind of an enchanted library, the books talk, and a wizard, so on. It's been a while since I read that one. Can't exactly remember all the details, but I remember enjoying it. But the book that I have decided to go with for you is A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. This is one I read for, I think I read it for Bookopoly-thon last year. It's really short, really fast-paced, but this was really fascinating. Not what I expected, but I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. And I think the fact that it wasn't entirely what I thought it was going to be is part of the reason that it stuck with me. Like, it's one that I remember quite well. It follows 2 young black girls, Tavia and Effie, who live in a world where sirens are real. All sirens are black women, but not all black women are sirens. So it faces with like these issues of sexism and racism, but with this fantastical spin on it. And it follows Effie and Tavia, who are 2 young girls, much like sisters, as they deal with these struggles, and also the struggle of who they are or what they are. Something that I didn't expect from this book is the number of fantastical beings in it. Each of these characters seem to have some sort of connection to the fantastical world. There's gargoyles, there's sprites, there's obviously sirens, and so many more, and the world was really confusing to me for a little while. However, towards the end, when it all sort of pieced together and made sense, I thought it was really clever. The way it all wove together, I think, was genius. Despite how confused I was for a decent portion of this, not really knowing where it was going, I think it wrapped up very nicely, and has been one that I've remembered for a little while. Just gonna read you the blurb on this one because I'm struggling to describe this without spoiling things. But Effie is fighting family struggles. She's pitted against literal demons from her past. Together, these best friends must navigate the perils of high school's junior year, but everything changes in the aftermath of a siren murder trial that rocks the nation, when Tavia accidentally lets out her magical voice at the worst possible moment. Okay, that's what I wasn't entirely sure if that was a spoiler or not. Tavia is a siren. Effie is not. So that's one of the large struggles that they deal with, and why this siren murder trial is such a big event in their lives, is that it puts Tavia's life in a perilous situation, because if she lets out that she's a siren, she's very much at risk. Additional risk, that is, for being a siren, because she's already a black woman facing the sexism and racism of everyday life. But on top of that, there's also a bit of a mystery around what Effie is, and how she ties into this, so I won't say anything more there, but slightly confusing but really compelling. A very fast-paced book, and I will say, if you do pick this up and you are a bit muddled in the beginning, hold on, because it all makes sense at the end when you know what's going on and what endgame is. But yeah, one that I definitely find very memorable, and it is a YA fantasy standalone as far as I'm aware. And your final roll number 6. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sci-fi or roll again? I'm gonna roll again just so I can like try and get a middle grade. Punishment. No. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. YA or orange? Hey, we'll go for an orange and just see what happens. And we have something hyped. Can I recommend you a hyped book? I don't know. We'll find out. And your little orange pie in there. And there you have it. There's your pie of recommendations from me to you. Enjoy. And finally, roll number 6 took us to Other. and we've landed on, can you name something hyped? So I'm going to recommend you something that is already hyped. You don't need me to recommend it, but I have read it and I see where the hype's coming from. And that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This follows a young girl called Rin who trains and tests to get into the most elite military school there is. But when she gets there, it's definitely not an easy journey for her. And then we face the difficulties and the differences between learning about war and preparing for war and the realities of war. Alongside that, there is this big fantastical element of it where there are gods and shamans, and there's also the struggles of opium addiction as well. There's a whole lot in here, and a lot of it is based on real life events. This one was really good, really fascinating, really compelling. I enjoyed my time reading this. I will say that I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as the hype would suggest that I would. There were definitely parts of this that I think were built up to be something that didn't quite hit the mark for me, but it was still a solid 4-star read for me, and I think it's a really great foundation for the rest of the series. I haven't read the sequels to this, but I think that the way this set up would mean that the sequels are going to be really something special. I think it does that really well. But at the same time, it is a lot more than just a setup. There is a lot going on in this book. It is emotionally impactful. There are a lot of trigger warnings in this, so beware of all of those. There are a ton. But yeah, this kind of has the recipe to be something that I would really enjoy. We know I love political fantasy. If you're a fan of political fantasy and you haven't given this a go, I would definitely encourage you to do so. There's a lot of politics going on here. Very action-packed, intriguingly fantastical. Like, the fantasy element of this isn't very obvious from the beginning, but I love the way that we get to learn about it and we get to know it. I found that really fascinating and intriguing. Kept me hooked. I was eager to know more about it, but we also have a lot of like devastation in here and a lot of emotional impact as well. I really need to get to the sequel to this at some point because I think I'm going to enjoy it even more than I did the first one. But for a hyped book that I don't necessarily recommend a lot, one, because I read it not that long ago, but two, because it's not like one of my all-time faves, but definitely still a hyped book that I can understand the hype behind and will also recommend, is The Poppy War. And there we have it. There are your 6 recommendations from TBR Pursuit for this round. If you would like me to do another round of TBR Pursuit Recommends at some point in the future, let me know. Let me know if you've enjoyed this. I would perhaps consider doing it again if it is something you've enjoyed. Play around for you rather than playing around for me. And if you just wanted some prompts for TBR Pursuit, there you go. You've got 6 rounds to do with what you will. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a thumbs up, chat to me down below. Let me know if you've read any of these, what you think of any of these. If you have any other recommendations for those prompts, that'd be interesting to know too. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with me for another day of Vida. I will see you tomorrow. Bye!